Hello, everybody, and welcome to Law and Society. Well, the Jenna Ellis egg has cracked, and so has the Sidney Powell. We're going to talk about Jenna Ellis, Sidney Powell, Dan Scavino today, and what that means for Donald Trump. So, if you're new to my channel, please like and subscribe, and let's dive in. Dan Scavino Jr., the same guy who sent out the "Will Be Wild" tweet on December 18th, told Jenna Ellis after Donald Trump had lost the Texas lawsuit that Ken Paxton had filed about the electoral process of other states, and told Jenna Ellis that the boss, meaning Donald Trump, because that's what they called him, would not leave the White House under any circumstances. The boss is not going to leave under any circumstances. We're just going to stay in power. Dan Scavino Jr. told Jenna Ellis after the December 11th ruling by the Supreme Court that threw the case out. And then we got some information from Sidney Powell saying that Donald Trump was told in front of her that he had lost by Pat Cipollone and Eric Hirschman. And every time they would tell him that and leave the room, Donald Trump would say, "This is what I have to deal with." So Donald Trump, this is why it's important legally. Dan Scavino saying that the boss would not leave under any circumstances gives a playing field, a foundation to look for evidence, or for Jack Smith and Fani Willis to build on evidence that Donald Trump knew and he had the corrupt intention of staying in power long before the January 6th insurrection, that he had been building up to it, and as early and concretely as early as December 11th. They had the election had been called. All of the legal ways of going about it through the courts had been exhausted, and Donald Trump still would not leave. And he had told his staff so. So it was an understanding amongst his close staff, meaning Dan Scavino Jr., he was his social media director, that he wasn't going to leave. And so, but I want to premise something here. Jenna Ellis telling us that Dan Scavino told her is hearsay. Okay? The only way that can be brought in is if Dan Scavino is compelled to testify, or there's some other hearsay exception to that testimony coming in. So Jenna Ellis may be a big step for the RICO case, because you're talking about a conspiracy that happened in Georgia, and the set of facts is a subset from the larger conspiracy that happened in DC. Now, Jack Smith should be paying close attention to this, because it builds on the intent of Donald Trump, the corrupt intent of grabbing power, of deprivation of rights under color of law. It would bolster the criminal conspiracy to defraud the United States. Jenna Ellis's testimony would open the doorway for that in the federal courts. But Jack Smith has to develop that, because if Jenna Ellis is taken on the stand and she says, "I heard this from, Dan Scavino," Dan Scavino would have to corroborate that, or it has to be corroborated by somebody else that, yes, Dan Scavino said that. He said that to me as well. Now, whatever the structure and however they are, Jack Smith decides to approach this, these are revelations that make the case against Donald Trump that much stronger. And this idea has the far-reaching impact of it is that Donald Trump remains in the race, so to speak. He has claimed most of the Republican spotlight, other than the debates. He is leading in the Republican polls, and as of right now, there's nothing to stop him from being on the election ballot in every state. There are arguments, as I've made, about the disqualification clause and all that, and all the four criminal indictments and criminal proceedings happening. All those things will have an impact as it goes through the courts. But as it stands now, Donald Trump continues to embolden the sort of hate and division, and goes as far as to call his political opponents vermin, and talks about establishing detention camps for immigrants. And I talked about in the previous video about his channeling of Hitler and attacking communists and vermin. Um, you know, it is a dangerous place for our country to be. We are really in a very perilous place historically. And if not enough Americans understand the importance of the 2024 election, there is a chance that our country will slide into dictatorship if there's even a slim chance that Donald Trump can grab power. So the vote in 2024 has to be so overwhelming. And I'm going a little bit into politics now. The vote for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris has to be so overwhelming that the electoral votes don't even come close to Donald Trump claiming that he had won. So you have to understand that we are in a very red flag situation, that our systems are still holding on, that it is still surviving the stress test. But if somehow Donald Trump grabs power, somehow there's a close election and it goes to the House of Representatives, we have a MAGA House of Representative, Mike Johnson, right now. So if he somehow gets to grab power and is successful at it, the American experiment, American democracy, our republic, will come to an end, because Donald Trump will turn it into an authoritarian state. So, with that said, that's the substance of what I wanted to say today. Hey, Deb, thank you for being here. It seems almost impossible how. Yeah, I mean, that is a big question, right? She didn't abandon ship until Donald Trump abandoned her. You understand? Like, until she got her own lawyer. So if Donald Trump would have provided her with her lawyer, then maybe she still would have not said anything. And that says a lot about Jenna Ellis. That actually sort of brings into question maybe her credibility. And, we're just going to have to see where this goes. But it's shocking, but it's something that we had known, that Donald Trump knew. You know what I mean? This is just another person coming out and saying it. And, Jenna Ellis is just singing. And Sidney Powell is now singing. And we'll have Mark Meadows, who was granted some level of immunity by Jack Smith. And then we have what's happening with Scott Perry's cell phone. And then we have what's happening in the criminal conspiracy case with the various motions that are going up and the various motions that Judge Chutkan will rule on. And all of this is happening. And this is, our government and our institutions are experiencing a huge stress test. And, one of the tests of that is going to be whether we can pass a stopgap legislation with the MAGA House of Representatives Speaker, who is proposing the same legislation that the Senate already said no to. And, that's November 17th is when that stopgap legislation expires, the one that happened under Speaker McCarthy, and then the government will shut down. So even that is this parallel uh, legislative way of obstructing justice on behalf of Donald Trump to slow down the levers of government is just, it's happening before our eyes. And I don't think that uh, there's enough alarm amongst all of the media groups to go out and point out exactly what's happening, you know? So, with that said, thank you, Zoila, for being here, and Deb. I'm going to leave it at that. If you have just arrived, please scroll to the beginning, and please like, share, and subscribe. I depend on your kindness.